I am so fortunate to be moderating the panel with these awesome gentlemen here, and I'm going to take just a moment to introduce each of them to you. We are going to be talking about mobile technology and its use and impact in disaster management, as well as sharing some of the very exciting things that they're doing. First of all, we have Ryan Bank here with Social Intelligence Corporation. And Ryan, just a little bit about Ryan, stemming from the 2010 Haiti earthquake, Ryan Bank, founder of Social Intelligence Corp. And advisor to the U.S. Coast Guard, built a system that was able to locate the position of survivors trapped in the rubble of the earthquake using their ability to post to social networks. Outstanding. Similar systems have also been deployed to major events such as BP oil spill, the Japan tsunami, and G8 and NATO summits. The system used social media and monitoring to find survivors after the 2010 Haiti earthquake in Port-au-Prince. Ryan will also show how almost any organization can use social data and emerging technology to boost situational awareness, find those in distress, and determine threats against people and infrastructure. Welcome, Ryan. And next, Dr. Andy. Andy has been involved in a broad range of research programs related to Homeland Security and Defense at MIT Lincoln Laboratory, where his work includes systems analysis, architecture, and technology assessments, as well as prototype development. He serves as the technical lead for the laboratory's Distributed Disaster Response Program, developing advanced technology solutions in support of large-scale crisis response and management. This technology deployed the Next Generation Incident Command System, which is being used in a variety of response operations, including combating major wildland fires in Southern California. Dr. Vidon also served as a U.S. Southern Command on the U.S. Southern Command assessment team that responded to the 2010 Haiti earthquake. And there's Dom Tolley with the American Red Cross. And Dom and his team have built smartphone apps that put critical information and services at people's fingertips when they need it most. Having this information in people's pockets when they need it most will save lives and reduce suffering. From the first app to the hurricane app to the soon-to-be-released earthquake app, all of those tools empower people with the knowledge they need at the time they need it. Building upon the work of staff at the St. Louis chapter and executives of Anheuser-Busch, Dom and his team have created a revised rating service to help businesses, schools, and organizations assess and improve their disaster readiness. And let me just say, I was on a radio program recently, and when I talked about the top 10 apps to be ready for disaster management, I shared with Dom that one of your apps was one of those on the top 10. So welcome, Dom. And we're looking for Nigel. Nigel, are you out there? We have a missing panelist. If you see Nigel, tell him his seat is up here waiting, right? Okay, so Nigel, well, let's just go ahead and introduce the man, okay? Right, use your app to find him. We should be, with this panel, we can find him if we really wanted to. Google him, oh, right? I think everybody's a little slap happy, all right? Nigel is a project manager for Google's crisis response team, which is changing how citizens stay informed during crisis by providing information and tools to help people collaborate during emergencies and build resilient communities. Before joining Google in 2011, Nigel led the R&D on humanitarian systems at Microsoft and spent several years at the United Nations helping lead pandemic contingency planning and the UN Joint Logistics Center's responses in Iraq after the 2004 tsunami and in Darfur. Nigel has taught courses in humanitarian design at Parsons, the New School for Design, partnering with groups like the World Bank and the Red Cross to develop innovative design thinking approaches to complex humanitarian and development problems. So even though Nigel's not here, I am confident he'll show up. And I just want to say, I know you're literate and everyone could have read that, but for the benefit of the video, we wanted to make sure that we capture all of the key information about these awesome panelists. So I am Pamela Macaulay-Bush. I am a professor at the University of Central Florida, where I lead the Human Factors and Disaster Management Research Team. In 2012, I was a U.S. Fulbright Scholar for the U.S. New Zealand Human Engineering and Mobile Technology and High Consequence Management Program. My team and I have developed communication models for representing flow of information in emergency operations centers, and have most recently, which is what I'm going to share with you this afternoon, developed an evaluation model for assessing handheld communication devices to support emergency management officials. Okay, so with that, and after I share just a little bit, well, thank you. Okay, I'll take some claps. I'll take some love. Okay. So I'm going to share a bit with you about my research team and some of the things we've been doing, and then each of these gentlemen will take just a few minutes to talk about some of the things that they're doing. But we want this to be interactive and give you an opportunity to really engage with us here in this closing session. So after they make a few brief comments, we will then open the floor for questions and hope to hear from you, and then we'll turn it over to Keith. Okay? So with that, I think everybody likes to talk about their research and their projects, so I'm going to be as brief as possible, but I love this stuff. So my team and I, we developed a quantitative model for assessing mobile technology with respect to disaster management. And when we talk about information and communication technologies, clearly they've had a transformative impact on the way that we respond to disasters, not just from an official standpoint, but also you have the community so involved at this point. So it really is changing the dynamics of disaster management and response. And we see ICT in almost all phases of the disaster management continuum. And it has clearly been shown, and just some of the examples I shared with you from our panelists, it's clearly been shown how it can be very effective at reducing the impact of disaster in many ways. Now, so it's essential that it is given its appropriate place. As much as I love technology, happy to have my 3 degrees in engineering and be a researcher for over 22 years, technology can't just be thrown at the problem. We need to understand how to best apply it. And while mobile technology has become highly relied on, particularly in countries where you don't necessarily have a lot of the infrastructure for other communication technologies, such as in those developing nations, it's important that we understand how to effectively apply it and what are the best tools to be used in these environments. So with respect to mobile technology, we've seen a greater breadth and depth of information that's available, again, throughout the disaster management continuum, particularly at those critical response times. And we have faster access to information. We also have enhanced community involvement, which can definitely be an advantage, but it must be managed. And the result should be, and we believe it is, better decision making as a result of this enhanced ICT. Now, what are some of the challenges that we see? We see over-reliance on community and non-official information sources, and that's becoming a real issue. And I'm pleased to see that there are some initiatives and also some social science-based research being funded by the National Science Foundation to look at some of these issues. You also have the potential for information overload. Sometimes we don't need all of this information when we're trying to make a decision. We only need the key information, and so sifting through unnecessary information can definitely slow down quality decision making. And then extreme dependence on the technology. It's one thing to be extremely dependent on your smartphone and your battery go dead when you're trying to send a text or find a pizza place, but it's quite another when you have a disaster pending and something's coming that's going to impact you as well as many others. And then this we started to see as well, there's a tendency to minimize the importance of official information from a community standpoint, because Bob, my neighbor, just sent me a text of the bridge down the road that's appears to be out, and so I'm not going to worry about what the official said about leaving this way because Bob said to go that way. Well, we like Bob, and we can have barbecue with him, but you probably should verify the information he says, at least with your official sources. And that's not to say that there can't be tremendous value from community participation, but again, it has to be managed. And so there's great difficulty we're seeing in determining the most appropriate mobile technology. My team and I attend the Governor's Hurricane Conference in Florida every year, and they bring emergency management officials from around the world to this meeting. And about 5 or 6 years ago, they always just had their smartphone and had it hooked to their belt. Well, now, what do you think they have? Smartphone, a smart pad, they're smart now. Okay, so they've got all of this technology that they're managing, and one of the most recent responses on a survey that we did with them is we want one device. And who was it that did the presentation this morning? The phablet. Okay, so maybe we'll add that to next year's evaluation or a survey. So they want one device. So in walks our team continuing to do our research, and the National Science Foundation actually has been funding our research for about the last 5.5 years, and where we're looking at mobile technology and trying to develop quantitative and validated models that can be used to assess the most appropriate type of mobile technology for particular environments. Okay? We're also looking to develop a quantitative model to be used to evaluate particular mobile devices. I'm so sorry, that's me. I'm so ashamed. You know what I do in class when my students' phones ring? I answer them. So anybody who want to answer my phone and tell them not to bother us anymore is welcome. Okay, so my sincere apologies. Okay, from a significant standpoint, as we know, wireless communication is everywhere. And it is being used with our emergency management officials. And I'm pleased when I see that they tend to, in many communities, and of course it depends on the economics of a particular county in terms of the degree of technology they have, but many counties, that is one of the first things that they do is upgrade the technology, buy new technology. Now, of course, we know how it works in this country. You've got your counties, your state, and your federal level, so obviously you need to be able to communicate with everyone in these types of situations. But I would hate to think that we're spending funds unnecessarily on technology that isn't effective at accomplishing the goals. And I would dare say even to optimally accomplish the goals, because this is something where we do need to seek optimal results. Then, as a human factors and ergonomics researcher, we see a lot of aspects of mobile technology that is not at all designed from a human factors or ergonomics perspective. And that's, again, okay if you're using it from a social perspective, but when you have critical decisions to be made, you need access to specific information that is impacting you as well as communities. It is a very good idea to focus heavily on the human factors and ergonomic aspects of these devices. Now, there's been some research done on this, but at this point, we haven't seen a broadly accepted methodology that's been developed to assess the devices. And of course, the technology, it moves so quickly. I mean, we got new devices, a new family of devices every few months. So whatever model we develop, it must be dynamic, and it needs to be robust. But again, there's nothing I've seen that's been broadly accepted to this point, and we do quite a bit of background on the literature to try to understand what's going on or stay abreast of things. Now, this is just a little bit of an overview of our research team. We're looking at communication technology, ergonomics and biomechanic issues, also some of the cognitive issues, and then the logistics. I have a colleague that's more on the logistics side at the university, so that area I haven't fully developed out because that is a focus for her. So briefly, our research methodology, just as most, we take a good and detailed look at the background information, looking at what's been done in the research community as well as in the applied community, what kind of solutions and applications of mobile technology appear to have been worked and seem to be used broadly. After that, we set about our data collection. We collected information from the community as well as from emergency management officials, and then we assess mobile devices, select mobile devices. We are, of course, in Florida, so hurricanes are of primary interest to us, but in addition to looking at here, U.S. The emergency management team, we wanted to include two island nations. So we have a collaboration with the College of the Bahamas, and we actually performed a similar research study there to compare the Bahamas emergency management needs. And of course, they get hit with more hurricanes than any country. They have the statistics there. And so it was just a great place to actually go, and their head of their NEMA, which is our FEMA, and his team were very helpful in terms of the research study. We also used New Zealand, and that was a part of the Fulbright Scholar. They invited me there to be a part of the research project, or actually to lead the research project and study mobile technology there. So we're collecting a good bit of information in terms of the best approach and best uses for mobile technology. Then after that, we determined the device selection factors, did ergonomic equipment evaluation, and then finally developed the aggregate mathematical model using fuzzy set theory and analytic hierarchy processing. Now, I'm going to go quickly through this in the interest of time and just talk to you about the categories and then get to the mathematical model, and I'd be happy to share additional information if someone's interested later. But the broad categories that we determined were necessary for this mathematical model were the usability factors, device selection factors, and then portability factors. Within our usability factors, it's traditional usability categories: the ease of learning, ease of use, ease of remembering, frequency errors, and subjective pleasure. And of course, this is all very something that we want to strongly consider, because when you talk about a person using a device in a high consequence or high pressure situation, you definitely want it to have high ease of learning and high ease of use, as well as ease of remembering capability. Then when it came to device selection factors, this information we gleaned from the surveys and our subject matter expert interviews. So audio clarity, portability, which is a big issue, and it actually became its own category, accommodation to environmental lighting, the battery life and type, which there have been many things that have been done to extend battery power, to switch out batteries. So they have many strategies depending on the environment and organization to deal with the battery life issue. Then the text entry method. whether you had the little keyboard or you did it by hand, and various other approaches. If you can speak your text entering, the grip, type of grip associated with the device, the screen size, durability, and then of course unit cost, because these are real people using these products every day and to respond to real situations. So unit cost was also a factor. And from then, as I said, portability became its own category. So looking at the weight, the width, and the length of the device, those were the initial factors in the portability model. And these models, or each of the different categories, has been expanded. And as I said, it's dynamic, so it will vary from category of device to category of device. For example, I expect to have one mathematical model that we use for mobile, for smartphones, then have a similar mathematical model but with different factors for smart tablets. And now that I've been introduced to phablets, have another mathematical model that's similar but with different factors. And when I say different factors, I mean different you have the usability, but what are the usability factors? And then, of course, the relative significance would definitely vary, because our subject matter expert HP analysis would be used to determine the relative significance of each of these factors in the broad equation as well as in the individual equations. So this is our overall mathematical equation. So the human factors and ergonomics rating for a device can be determined by this linear equation, where you take the overall usability rating times the relative significance of that value, and then continue device selection factors times their respective relative significance, and of course add the portability times its relative significance. Now, just briefly from a usability so that was the overall model, and of course it was hierarchical. Each of the different categories had their own, obviously their own factors. We performed an AHP analysis to obtain the relative significance associated with each of those, and used fuzzy set theory to obtain the universal discourse for each of those different factors. Okay, so that's just a little bit about how we came up with the equation. So once again, usability rating of existence for each usability factor, and then the weighted priority determined from AHP analysis for each of those. And we did the same thing for the device selection factors, where DS is equal to the sum of J sub I times D sub I, and then likewise for the portability factor. So again, this is our overall mathematical model. We performed a validation study and assessment in our lab, and I hate to say this because I don't want to sound biased, but when we performed the validation of the model, and the iPhone was determined to be the most appropriate for the emergency management, the officials need, the needs that they identified. So, but we're looking, and that was just for this group that we're looking at with the data collection. Of course, the model is dynamic, but I don't think the most important thing is that the iPhone had the highest rating. I think the most important thing is that we actually have a mathematical model that allows us to have some granularity in terms of understanding and looking at what the factors are associated with using a smart device for emergency management. And so our research continues. That was a preliminary model. We are doing additional work and looking at additional smart devices, and hope to continue this and keep publishing this work, and then even see it used more broadly. So at this point, I'm going to allow my panelists, each of them, to take about 5 minutes and share a bit about their work, and then we will open it up for discussion with you.
I realized by coming to this conference that I should have paid more attention to math, because I was a TV producer before this and kind of got thrown into this by just a random career path, but I'm glad I did. Really all this, this concept started with the Haiti earthquake. I had been advising the Coast Guard on using social media, but in a more traditional way, and the Haiti earthquake happened, and I put together a system that was able to find the location of trapped survivors based on them posting in social media networks or communicating with their cell phone. So I know we're going to talk about mobile, but I don't think you can just talk about mobile. I think that social data and mobile are so intertwined that it really is one thing. Mobile is the concept of how you get the data, but we're, from my standpoint, looking at the data set as a whole. So really quickly, I differentiate between social media and social data, being the social data is the data set that social media networks generate. So we're looking at that data set as a whole. My mom, however, likes to tell people that her son likes to do stuff in social media. So I think that her friends think I play on Twitter all day, which I guess is kind of true. Anyway, I have since deployed this on multiple different occasions with the Haiti earthquake. In the month following the Haiti earthquake, we processed over 80,000 distress messages. It resulted in over 4,000 search and rescue cases that we then passed through the Unified Command, through Southcom, through the Joint International Response down to the ground. Japan tsunami, we found about 470 survivors using a similar system. It's been deployed for, as I think you mentioned, the Olympics and NATO, G8, all kinds of stuff. So really what I do is I take a look at emerging technologies and the concept of using social data to find people in distress, to look at cybersecurity and cyber terrorism issues, which is something that came out of NATO. We're able to detect anytime a organization has a breach or a leak of classified material. We're able to determine anytime a user account gets breached or leaked. And all of this is just because once you have the tool sets, just depending on what you're looking for, we just kind of alter some of the algorithm or search terms. So it's a brief introduction, I guess, but thank you. Sorry.
Okay, so my name is Andy Vidon, and I'm at MIT Lincoln Laboratory. I think most of you heard our talks earlier today, so I'll try not to repeat myself too much. So I do want to focus a little bit on the NICS system that I presented, the Next Generation Incident Command System, and tie it into the mobile and social realm a little bit. As I mentioned this morning, we developed NICS to be used by first responders across all risk disasters, so whether it's floods, earthquakes, wildland fires. And a big design point for us was to make sure that all data from all types of sources is available to all responders, whether they're in higher command, higher headquarters, emergency operations centers, and most importantly, out in the field. Because those are people actually on the front lines and able to use the data most effectively and also create the data from the front lines of the response. So a big design from the early point was to make sure that data is available on mobile devices. When we started back in 2007, 2008, mobile devices primarily at that time were ruggedized laptops in vehicles. So these are the Panasonic Toughbooks. More recently, as everybody's starting to carry a smartphone in their pockets, we're designing NICS to be used on tablets, on smartphones, both iOS and Android, working very closely with the Coast Guard, supported by DHS S&T, in order to develop the NICS system to move out to these mobile devices. And I think as everyone here can attest, being mobile, being accessible, has been a key to getting more usage, more traffic on the NICS system. But at the same time, we're finding that if you're moving to mobile devices, your screen real estate isn't as large, so your applications, your system has to be very intuitive. And one of our mantras is we have to develop systems for the tired, dirty, and hungry. Because if any of you have been on any response operations, these guys after 12-hour shifts are tired, dirty, and hungry. So all our apps, all our systems are very intuitive, or at least we try very hard to make sure that they're intuitive and simple to use, but at the same time provide the right data at the right time. So with that, I'll end there.
Hi, I'm Dom Talley from the American Red Cross. For those that were here earlier, so one of my primary jobs was to get a lot of information that people got through books and through various mechanisms, get them into their hands. And we used mobile as the primary channel to do that. So we've rolled out about 5 apps, and to date they've been rather successful. A lot of interactivity, a lot of use, particularly during disasters, no surprise there. And we're very pleased with what we've been able to do so far. Certainly I had a very similar equation when we were designing the apps, and it said make it red. I don't know what happened, but it's really important that when you're designing the apps, you think through who the end user is going to be, right? So in the preparedness apps, we thought they were going to be primarily moms, some dads, in the 40 to 55-year-old range that were going to download these to protect themselves, but mostly their family. So we had to take some, we weren't as scientific as that at all, trust me. But we had to take that into account. What information are they looking for? What information is relevant? And to your point, the screen size is very small. So you can have the information, but you got to prioritize it, and you got to give them the most important stuff quickly. And then for those who have the time and the interest as they dig down, you can certainly have that and link it to. So that was kind of the big design paradigm we had for the mobile. And it's been very good as, you know, protecting the family and maybe protecting a neighbor or two. If you look at what we're trying to do next, is we're trying to figure out, so then how do you make that family have an impact broader than just their family, right? So how do you get interaction between people in a community when something happens such that they're helping each other? Study after study after study has shown that, you know, neighbor helping neighbor, particularly in the first couple hours of an emergency, is the most critical piece you need to do. So we're trying to figure out between social networks and other mechanisms, how do you enable that through the mobile channel, through other type of things to do that. So that's a nut we're currently attacking and trying to crack. And we're also using it to start to manage our volunteers. When a disaster happens, a lot of people will show up at a Red Cross chapter doorstep. They'll be calling us saying, how can I help out? And it becomes a very unmanageable process. You have hundreds, thousands of people trying to help, and there was really no efficient way to manage it other than just get on a long line, I'll get to you when I get to you. Now we rolled out an app called Team Red Cross app, which enables people that their call to action to be, if you want to help us, learn about what opportunities there are before you, right? You're not going to be leading a team, charging up the hill. You're going to be a distribution worker, you're going to be giving out meals. So we use the app to try to educate the people on what the opportunities are there before them, such that if they do want to continue on what we call the mission, they can then accept that and keep moving on. So they come in better educated. So mobile is not only being used to educate people, but also to manage people who are trying to help. We actually call it missions. So when something does happen, like we had in Colorado, we will send out a mission that we need volunteers in this particular area. We'll actually send a push notification for those who have registered and say, I need 200 people in this area by tomorrow at noon. Click here if you're going to do it. And we found out it's a great way to start to mobilize people who are trying to help. And then they come in further educated, and they're able to help us further down the line. And that's something else you're going to see more and more of. How do you take mobile into the disaster operations? Particularly, as you know, in the big ones, a lot of the mobile infrastructure is gone. So then how do you do all that other fun stuff to do so?
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. So with that, we welcome, Keith. You got a question? Oh, okay. Yeah, I thought you were cutting us off. No. Don was going to be glad, right?
No, I have a question.
Okay. Does he need to use the mic? I think you need so they can get you. Yes.
Okay. I'll grab this mic, and that way whoever comes up can grab. I don't think we've got a mobile mic. My question is, given that we do need to verify data, we do need to be able to rely on the official information of what the story of what the emergency is and what the situation is. Sometimes, as we've heard today, the official data may not be the best information. One of the things we heard today was that Hurricane Sandy, one of the best information gathering and most accurate information on open gas stations was by a group of high school students that got together and put it together. So what kind of flexibility you're building into your systems to accept outside data from sources that become available out of the blue on the fly in an emergency situation, and how do you incorporate that into your apps and into your databases so that other people can take advantage of them?
Everybody.
See how that worked? Don't pass it to him. Never sit on the end. Don't do that on a panel. That's rule one.
It's amazing, right? And I said I've only been to Red Cross 2 years, and for you folks that have been in these, deep in this industry, everything changes when a disaster really happens. So all the logic you have is, we're going to verify the data, we're going to measure as a reliable resource, and you're like, is it close enough, right? That you think you can help somebody, and are you willing to be wrong? And it can't be grossly wrong. You can't say go over that bridge and have it be down. So we weigh that, and Hurricane Sandy was a great example of where people were putting up, gas stations. Did they really have gas? I don't know. Put it up. Is FEMA really there? I don't know. They say they are, but we have to take their word for it. But there is that people are trusting you've done some level of analysis, but you can't go all the way and verify it. And it doesn't come from a trusted source, and that's why we're trying to figure out. Now you have, if communities are interacting with each other, now there's no official source, right? And then how do you let that play out? And that's the struggle we're trying to figure out, and maybe social.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can give an example where just time and time again you see the military and government, particularly just the paralysis of analysis. They'll take a look at something and they'll be trying to figure it out, and they'll overcomplicate an answer. A 2-second story was during Haiti. After the initial kind of response where we pretty much had found a lot of trapped survivors, and now we're kind of dealing with some of the longer term issues. I was brought into Southcom, the U.S. Southern Command, to work with the intel people about finding open operating hospitals in the Port-au-Prince area. So I was taken into a huge boardroom. I mean, this thing was straight out of movies, you know, like maps up on screens, and there are all these like generals and top people with their aides like whispering and typing on Blackberries behind.
My boss built that place.
So he's the one to blame. So anyway, so I mean, it's like super official. I'm sitting there like, you know, should have paid attention earlier. But they were trying to find this, and so this top guy, he's going on about how they were using intelligence analysts, like spy agency, to use satellite imagery to look and compare it from before the earthquake to after to see if the hospitals were open. And so I leaned over to the guy who brought me in, another intelligence guy. I'm like, what information do we know? And he slides his folder across the table and he kind of skitters towards me. I look at it, and it's got in there the names of all the hospitals, the you know, doctor, the CEO's number, like all the main contact information for them. And so they keep going on about, you know, what their drones had found and what the satellites had found. And I just looked at it and kind of like timidly raised my hand. I'm like, have we just tried calling them? And there was silence, you know, like nothing. And finally the top guy who was sitting across the room, this big kind of barrel-chested southern guy, he goes, well, son, didn't you just let the air out of the truck's tires? Well, that's a kind of an example of it, you know? Like, they had information, but why would somebody post online that something's open? I mean, I don't think people are going to be malicious, especially in a disaster, in a response. I think that if somebody tells you it's open, and especially if another guy tells you it's open. And until you find otherwise, why waste your time trying to prove through all of your official channels that something's open?
And I think that's the power of crowdsourcing your data, right? So Wikipedia and open source, the open source movement has really proved the concept that crowdsourcing works. So over time, data kind of sorts itself out and gets verified by the crowd and gets added to and so on. So
Yeah, absolutely.
But gentlemen, can I just throw something out here? Certainly, I think you're all right. I mean, and we have seen the power of crowdsourcing, and certainly you want to get information out as quickly as possible. But you remember the point I raised about the community involvement has, in many respects, minimized the trust and confidence that people have in official information. And so one of the things, Dom, you mentioned a trusted source. I'm not going to build another mathematical equation while I'm sitting here, but I think that there are a number of factors that have to be considered, and it has to be done quickly. We're not talking about bringing, 700 software people and engineers to write the model, but very simply, if you look, you mentioned it, the number of people who have provided the information, if there's redundancy in terms of validating the information. Also, the time at which it was provided. If it's the most recent information, if you have redundancy, and then if you have something like a video or a picture to verify the information. So there are ways that you can enhance the confidence associated with this kind of information and also allow it to be integrated with the information from official sources. So I don't like to see people not taking official sources seriously. And I know they're slow as molasses in winter sometimes, and it takes forever to make a decision. But I do think that oftentimes that information needs to be heeded because there are specific things that maybe the community is not aware of with respect to the official response.
So just to add to that, not everything can be solved with Twitter data. So think of the Fukushima disaster. People won't know on their own where the radiation levels are high and so on.
Right.
You need special sensors, you need official sources to relay that information. So Twitter has a good place in disaster response, and social media does, but real sensors, official sources needs to be there as well.
It has to be a combination of both, as you're hearing, and I think that mobile as a platform is an ideal way to push this out. There sometimes, depending on the community, can be distrust of official sources. Other times they're heated dramatically. I think that if you can push that out and gain that relationship initially, I think you're going to benefit in the long run. So.
And I think you also have to brand it properly, right? So if it is official data and it should be branded that way, if it's user community data, it should be branded that way, because most people are smart enough to kind of know what the difference is, right? So if this is coming from your government versus this is coming from, 10 people out in your neighborhood.
Gotcha. Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I don't know if this one's working. Okay. Remember when Arnold was the governor of the state a few years ago, and there was fires and getting out of control, and they were getting closer to the homes. And if you went to the official site, you saw a smiling face saying he was going to speak at a certain location. Nothing on the fires, absolutely nothing. And what was happening on the fringe, there was journalists using Twitter effectively, telling people where the fires were, where they were advancing. Now, we come 3-4 years to now, you had Sandy, a number of crowdsourcing Twitter feeds are coming in, which was erroneous and which was false. So we have a bad example of the state not doing it right, official media, and when you had on the ground citizen reporters doing it right, and now we have a situation, both are doing it wrong. So my question to the panel, is there anyone out there, whatever jurisdiction, that's actually getting it right, which has a level like Crisis Mapper, I guess top tier, which is I volunteer with Crisis Mappers, and we have people who are at the top level that get the Twitter feeds and vet it, make sure that it's accurate information before they pass it on. So I'm asking the panel, is there examples of some jurisdictions where people have got it right?
Ryan, this sounds like a question for you.
It is a very good question. There are cases, I don't know about jurisdictions, and by the way, you guys elected Schwarzenegger as a governor. That's hilarious. I love that. So anyway, I applaud you.
He wants to be president, by the way.
That's true. But yeah, absolutely, they get it right. They get it wrong. During the Boston bomber case, which I was associated with, I saw a post that said validity or importance of media sources. And it said number 1 was Twitter, number 2 was Reddit, number 3 was their pet turtle, number 468 was mainstream media. And there is some of that. There's a lot of distrust, especially among a socially connected public, when they see something first on a social site or something like that. It takes a while for the media to get there, to vet it, to verify it. It takes longer for the government or military to do so. It comes back to that combination. It comes back to dispelling rumors and myths. One of the things that you see a lot in disaster response is if somebody's sitting at home, I'm sitting there in Chicago, and I'm looking there at whatever's going on, and I think I have a great idea. If I post it to my Facebook page, like send hair to the oil spill, well, now I'm just some nut job who's saying send hair to an oil spill. But if I post, this just in from the Coast Guard, send hair to the oil spill, they need to blot up oil with it, well, now it has this validity because supposedly it came from an official source. That was never the case. We were getting bags of nasty, disgusting cut hair. I can't tell you how much. It's gross. I'm sorry if you did it. But we looked for something else for the public to do. So one of the things that we did was we created an adopted grid program. And the adopted grid was very much like what Desi and Willow did the other day with the Map Mill program. What adopted grid was we broke down the satellite imagery each pass, each day, by grid square. And then we let the public sign up to adopt that virtual square. And you got to see that there's a fallen tree here and shoreline here and whatever. And day 1 it looks like this, day 2 it looks like that, you now know what it looks like. And then you would report via clicking a flag button if anything changed. And that was a way that we could determine wildlife impact, we could determine oiled shoreline, things like that. It almost didn't matter. I mean, the data that came out of that's great, but it almost didn't even matter. We would have done it if we hadn't gotten the data, because it gave the public some way to help. Now, in this case, it was very beneficial. we were able to get that data, and we were able to basically crowdsource the analysis of satellite imagery that would have taken days per run into minutes. So it worked out very well. We did it again with Hurricane Sandy, but it gave people a way to interact. So I don't know. I mean, I think you do need to establish the trust with your community and be able to dispel the rumors and say, even acknowledge what's going on. If you create a system on your website for your jurisdiction where there's an emergency alert banner at the top or notification system, get that up right away. You know, push things out to push notifications, text message, email lists. There are companies that do this for you, and you can hire them and they will create the entire package. And that way you can, right from the get-go, say, we don't know, you know, stick with us. This is where we are. And they'll trust you a lot more that way.
At the Red Cross, obviously, we have a Twitter account, and there's a couple changes that we're doing on how we manage during disasters. One is we actually have digital volunteers. So these are people that, and they're from Germany, they're from other countries, such that they're not impacted by the event going on in the States. And we train those people for as many questions as we're up to date, such that when something does happen and someone posts something on Twitter, they can answer that response. So we're training digital volunteers to be able to help manage that channel. The other thing we're doing is that used to be managed all disasters on a national basis out of Washington, D.C. As we're starting to move now, that Twitter hub is actually going to move to the area where the disasters are happening, such that you do have people who are managing their responses in that area that are within the local area that it's happening. So we're hoping that better information will come, right? Somebody sitting in D.C. has no idea what's going on in downtown Denver. But hopefully your local team that's in the community, that has the contacts, will know. Just that we're trying to get better information locally and manage it properly. And also not set expectations beyond what we can fulfill. We don't want people to think if you just send a tweet to the Red Cross, we're coming. You got to weigh all that stuff. But certainly digital volunteers, expanding it locally, we're hoping will make it even more reliable channel for us.
And back to your question about if anyone's doing this right, I think the convergence of social, mobile, and also cloud computing, it's all new technology, and I think we're still iterating on the right use of this new technology. So I think we're all putting out brand new applications, iterating on them, testing them out in the field, and that's part of technology development.
I agree, and I'm pleased that, you guys probably saw it as well, that Craig Fugate, the head of FEMA, he made a statement that that FEMA will be mindful and really figure out, and I'm using very loose terms, figure out but how to make the most of the social media, because it's impacting at the federal level, at the state and at the county level, whether you wanted to or not. And I'm glad you said that, Andy, about how this technology is so new, and I'm not making excuses for official sources not being up to date, but so much of this is so new, and when you look at the age of most of your decision makers in the emergency management community, many of them are people who are still getting comfortable with their smartphones. So you really are going to have a mind shift in that community, or have them integrate some of the people who are more on top of this technology and really can understand how it can be used most optimally to help them with their decision making. I suggest they partner with people that have already done it, okay, like Ryan, okay, like Dom at MIT, or not, Dom's at Red Cross, Andy is at MIT, because we don't have the luxury of time here, where years ago you could take 2-3 years to come up with a solution. By the time you finish studying that, 2 years later, you've got new technology, so you're obsolete. Other questions?
I think there's a parallel here with lessons learned from automating factories. Back to time, automation was a great thing, so you could automate the heck out of everything, but people forgot in the manufacture of a product there were certain checkpoints that had to be matched. You had to check this, you had to check the dimensions, made sure this fit with that. Otherwise, you'd have some crazy robot absolutely destroying your product. I think there's a parallel here in that you've got the crowdsourcing, you've got tremendous sources of information available, but there's got to be some checkpoints preserved through that process, especially on the heels of a natural disaster. If there's some bad-minded group out there that wants to create panic, that's a perfect opportunity for them to do so. So you're going to have some checkpoints built into the whole process. And I like the idea of adopting the grid type thing, so you have some qualified people out there in certain locations that you can pre-qualify some of this. That's possibly a good area.
Excellent. Excellent point. Other comments?
This feels long. So it's as if we're in a tide turning of information age, in the sense that before organizations, trusted organizations like Red Cross would announce, or the news people would announce that, okay, there's a hurricane coming or there's a flood. And right now I find oftentimes, I found out about natural disasters through my friends on Facebook, like, oh my God, these tremors, they're making me dizzy, or, things like that. So what I'm wondering is, at an organization like Red Cross, how would you usually find out if, say, there was a big earthquake off the Philippines? And is there any way that, like, I know this is different from the social media you were talking about, metadata versus media, but suppose everybody on Facebook all of a sudden said, oh, I see a UFO, to be facetious, but, they
might have saw it. Go ahead.
I mean, like, is there anybody looking at that kind of information? Does it get fed into, if it's a remote area and they're like, oh, we see tremors or we see smoke, does that get to the organizations?
So, I mean, we do have people that monitor the social channel 24/7 to see what's going on. And actually, if you ever got the demo, there's, you can see what's trending, what's not trending, and even small. So there are constantly people there. And we even use, again, those digital volunteers to help monitor that. Obviously, being the Red Cross, I mean, and we also look for all the government, all the formal notices that come out. And every day, everybody in the Red Cross who's in disaster operations gets a report on what's brewing anywhere in the world, whether it be a storm or anything going on for that. So we monitor both. Obviously, one we treat more serious than the other. For that, we even monitor what gets written by in the apps. So people can comment on the apps and say, this isn't working, or I'm not getting. I mean, people will take it go to the app store and put a comment if they're also having trouble there. So every day, we're looking at those comments constantly to see, are we having trouble with our alerts? And I just saw one last night that said, the alert, they're great, but it got here an hour late. So we're literally going to dig into that and see if that's true. So we're looking at everywhere, at every customer response to see if it's valid or not and chase it down. So,
Thank you.
Just to add on to that, I would say don't forget that governments and large bodies are very good at some of this stuff. So if they put out an alert that there's a hurricane coming, don't doubt it. I mean, we don't need to crowdsource this. There's a hurricane coming. Run. Like don't overcomplicate it. That being said, yeah, we're monitoring stuff. It's a concept of event detection through social data, and it's a really, really, really new topic. And am I going to see that the hurricane is coming? No, the National Hurricane Center is. They're really good at that. They're going to find it. But we're looking at things like reports of pet dogs acting strange. Because if you see enough people reporting that their animals or their livestock are acting strange, it can be an indication of something that there's a weather product happening. There's some weather event. And so am I going to be the one to put out the hurricane notice? Absolutely not. But we would look and start looking for some of these factors to then inform those as just another source of information to the National Hurricane Center, to people who might be able to pick up on this. We're doing it with global health, looking at reports of things that aren't directly saying, I have malaria, to then be able to gauge global health. But event detection is going to be a massive, massive thing, I believe. And we're really getting into trying to use that social data to detect the spikes, to detect a bunch of people suddenly talking about something. It's just probably not going to be that a hurricane is coming.
And I think we have time for one more question. Okay. Daniel?
Sure. Twist my arm. So we have a crowd of engineers here, a lot of whom are very enthusiastic about what we either already knew and heard about again or just learned regarding sensors connected to cell phones, or the use of cameras and microphones in cell phones for sensing data and then using that data for very clever things. So I'm wondering in this context, whether it's the microphone built into your phone or the camera, the use of incorporating those somehow as elements that can generate data that can be gathered from zillions of cell phones and used by the Red Cross to determine more conditions following or preceding a disaster, or if there are one or two little clever accessories that, you know, if at least engineers carried these around in their pockets and connected them up to their cell phones after a disaster, what kind of information would help you guys do your job better?
Good question.
That's a very good question. So we'll go to him again.
I mean, so the mobile apps have been very successful, and the alerts are one of the key aspects because people want it in their pocket when something bad is happening. And to the point is the government does a fantastic job of getting those alerts out. As long as you get them fast and get them to the people, I mean, there's earthquake sensors, there's boom, it's incredible what they do. The problem is when the telecommunication channel goes down, what do you do, right? So now the hurricane is just about to hit and it blew out a major substation or something like that. So we're working with people. So yeah, how do you now start to use some satellite technology or some other dongle that hangs off your phone such that I can still continue to get that information to people on the alerts? Now they have the information they need, but they may not know that the storm is over. They may, I mean, because especially if you lost telecommunications. So a big push for us is how do we keep those alerts occurring in those disaster areas after the telecommunications goes down. So we're the alternate. So we're working with chip manufacturers and others to say what is that technology such that those alerts can keep coming, because it's real important to do that. So we're trying to figure that out.
I would say you had there's two aspects to your question, and one is that you hit on is what can engineers do, you know? And I would say there's definitely the first part of it is kind of the Internet of Things, right? The network of things. So if we can have all this sensor data, and if we can have all these things that are out there and connected to the internet, how do we grab all that? And that's a huge topic. There's a bunch of really interesting conferences coming up on how we can use put really small little sensors connected to either a Wi-Fi mesh network or a little Raspberry Pi and put them along the coast and detect a variety of things. That's awesome, for sure. There's no one answer, go buy this at Best Buy and clip it to your phone and you'll contribute. But I think what this really comes down to is the fact that we are a group of enthusiastic engineers. And so I would encourage everybody to just look at things differently. I feel that this is what I did. I was just some schmuck sitting in his apartment in Chicago in sweatpants when the Haiti earthquake hit. Now there's an image you need, right? I won't be more descriptive than that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But I really do feel that way. You know, I'm not a genius coder or something, and you guys are.
Sure you are.
I'm not. I really am not. Like, I'm some schmuck who, you know, was just sitting around. You guys are the genius coders. I just look at things differently, so I encourage you guys to do that. Look at something that comes out. If you read about some new service, some new product, some new device, some new software as a service, or anything, and you look at it and you say, this is really cool, just have the question in your head, how could this be used to help somebody? It may not. You know, it may just be fun. But this is what the sharing is for. This is what these great conferences are for, is to really just show, hey, this is what I did with the tool set that I had. What can you guys do? Because there's a lot of problems to solve. So
We call that innovative thinking.
Right, and I think, Daniel, you'll see a lot of new apps, both hardware apps and software apps are going to be developed in the coming years. For example, if your phone can detect local weather and feed that into a larger system, can it detect local wind direction, wind speed? That might help help folks understand how fires might spread on a local level. Utilizing your smartphone as a peer-to-peer ad hoc network in case the mobile cell towers go down. So yeah, I think you're going to see more and more of these types of both apps, software apps and hardware dongles are going to be developed.
this stuff's exciting. I mean, this is really exciting
is.
stuff. I get fired up about it.
It really is. And with Daniel's question, we all have been given our charge to go out and think innovatively and think about what we can contribute and add as engineers, tell other engineers, tell non-engineers, because there's just not enough of us to totally solve every problem. But let's be about coming up with innovative solutions to address some of these problems. And with that, let's thank our awesome panelists.